On the bloody trail. It has been 22 hours since Jennifer went missing, but I may have found a trail. We were camping together this week, and we're taking a hike along a beautiful area of the forest, but she got lost. She had been complaining about an upset stomach and needing to eat something, and for some reason she couldn't stomach the idea of eating any of the provisions we had brought, mostly trail mix and energy bars. Along the trail, she had needed to take a break, and I thought since we were over an hour away from camp, and with the upset stomach, she might be sick. I gave her a little space and privacy briefly, and she went behind a bush. That was almost an entire day ago. She had just vanished. I have been looking everywhere, and in my efforts to locate her, I have diverged so far off of the trail that I think I might also be lost. But I have to keep looking. I have to find her. I am exhausted, and my body aches, but I continue walking, searching, and when my dry, aching throat can muster the strength, calling out to her to see if there's any response. I feel like I am going in circles, following my own footsteps. What I thought was a trail turned out to be nothing. And worse, I hear the roar of thunder in the distant mountain, and know that rain is not too far off. My hopes of finding any trace or trail were evaporating quickly. I had already searched for an entire day, with no results, only being forced to stop for a few hours when it was completely dark, since I couldn't find my way back to camp. I had no replacements or batteries if my only light source went out, and had to use it sparingly. Indeed, I would likely only get more lost if I wandered into the darkness alone. Alone, just like Jennifer was. I suppressed a shudder and felt a deep sadness and fear wash over me, thinking about how she must be feeling. I felt terrible holding off my search for even a minute if she was in trouble. I pictured her smile, her beautiful blue eyes, so full of love. Her auburn hair silhouetted as it often was by the frequent backgrounds of the many scenic forests and places of natural beauty we both loved so much. Why did you have to get lost? Why can't I find you? I thought hopelessly. It was not like her. She was always the survivalist. She camped out here way more than I did. Many times on her own, she would always say she liked to challenge herself, and that sometimes when I asked to come, she would explicitly state that she needs to do this alone. Just then, I see something that snaps me out of my reverie. It is on the ground near a path I swear I had been down already. It is a brownish-red stain on the dirt. I bend down to inspect it closer and touch the reddish soil. It is wet and smells coppery. This appears to be a small trace of someone or something's blood. I can't tell if it is human or not, but panic starts to simmer in my chest. As I consider it might be Jennifer's, she might be hurt. I try to steady myself and focus on the blood, and sure enough it looks like, yes, there it is, a small trail. It continues down. Despair, anxiety, and hope combine to put me into a nervous frenzy as I rush to scrutinize every detail of the trail and follow it as closely as I can. I almost lose it when it seems to go on several yards with no trace, but I pick it up again and move as fast as I can. My heart sinks when I find the source of the blood. The bloody trail terminates in the ravaged carcass of a deer. Something had injured it and chased it a good distance before ripping it apart. The scene was particularly barbaric and seemed excessive for any type of predator in this forest that I knew of. Unless there was a grizzly bear with rabies, I couldn't think of anything that would cause this kind of destructive mess, and any potential prospect terrified me, as I thought about whatever had caused this. Still lurking in the trees, or worse, stalking Jennifer as well. I push the morbid thought aside and press on. I walk through the clearing with the deer carcass and hear the loud scream, or what sounds like some sort of animal dying. It is coming from the way I am heading, and I slow down accordingly and try to hear anything else. I see a small alcove near where the trail leads towards the hills, and eventually the mountain pass, and it gives me a general reminder of where I might be. Thankfully, I might not be as lost as I thought I was. But this only matters if I can find my way back with Jennifer. I won't leave without her, so I look around for the sound I had heard. I can't find the source immediately, but there in the distance I think I see. Yes, there is something else. On a rock there is another spattering of blood. Nearby there is what appears to be a large clump of hair, and my heart catches in my throat when I examine it. And it is indeed human hair, light auburn hair the same color as Jennifer's. I try to quell my rising panic. I need to find her fast. Who knows what might be after her? I look down and see that, fortunately, the blood is once again leaving another trail, leading out of the clearing and up towards the hills. I follow it, and it winds up the hills, almost following the path's serpentine suggestion perfectly, like the sanguine trail has its own sentience as it leads to my unknown destination. I am halfway up the hill when the rain begins. I start to run, moving as fast as I can and losing the trail at one point in my haste, since I know it will soon vanish completely, and when I am up the hill and it diverges, I will not know where to go. I hear an ear-splitting thunderclap, and shortly afterward I hear a cry of pain and a loud shriek from a person, a woman. "Jennifer, it's you, I found you. It must be her." I sprint up the hill as fast as my tired limbs will carry me. I slip and almost fall off the sheer cliffside, as I have ascended a good portion now. I manage to pull myself up with my fingers slipping on the wet rock and mud. I run up the hill, each portion of the bloody trail growing fainter and harder to see as it slowly fades away in the rain. I reach the top, and there is a large natural cave up here, the mouth of which seems to glower ominously at me, as I pause only for a moment outside. Then I rush inside, when I see, as I half expected as soon as I saw the cave, a faint bit of blood near the entrance. Further into the cave I spy a glimmer of light. I can scarcely believe it, but as I cautiously step closer, yes, there is a small campfire in here. "It must be her," I say aloud, and start rushing forward. The stillness of the cave's ambiance is broken by a tortured scream, and now that I am this close, I see the source. I freeze in my steps, my mouth hangs open, and I look on in silent terror at the sight before me. Something humanoid sits crouched near the campfire, its hands clutching what appears to be a large dead wolf. There is a wet crunching sound, and a sick tearing and sucking noise as it bites, tears, strips, and consumes large chunks of meat from the poor animal. The figure is slight and appears to be covered in crude homemade leathers and large portions of various animal bones and pelts. Around this small campfire is a veritable boneyard of stripped animal skeletons, many looking recently flinched. Blood is everywhere coating the walls and the floors, and a small pool in the center leads a gentle incline to funnel it into a morbid river out of the cave mouth and down the hill. To my dawning horror, I look at what is next to the figure and stifle a gasp. It is what appears to be the eviscerated body of a park ranger, the tattered remnants of the uniform still visible among the destroyed body of what remains. I know I am in danger, but I have to see while this thing is distracted. I have to see if Jennifer is here alive or dead, I must know. I summon my courage and step forward carefully and quietly. I see several parts of human bones and some still intact but largely eaten bodies. None of them looked like Jennifer's. Then I make a mistake and miss a brittle bone on the floor, and it loudly crunches under my boot. The figure looks over and drops its meal and stands upright. It slowly turns to regard me, and when I look upon its face, I fall to my knees. Horror and joy mix to form a confusing turmoil of emotion in me. All I can do is stare dumbly at that face. The beautiful face with loving blue eyes, now contorted in feral concentration. The soft auburn hair, now matted in blood. Even saturated in blood and viscera, and wearing fragments of animals and humans, I knew it was her. I couldn't speak, so Jennifer spoke to me. I am sorry, you were not supposed to find me. I told you I needed to do this alone like I always do, but you insisted, so I tried to sneak away. I am just so hungry, I need to eat. I can't control it. I needed you to stay away. She steps towards me and licks her lips. I can hear the blood coursing through your veins. I can taste it on the air. She takes another step. I can hear your muscles tensed in your body as they are. Call out to me to be savored. She pauses a brief moment and holds her hand to her chest, looking sad. I am so sorry. I will miss our walks together. She gnashes her teeth and flexes her arms out almost involuntarily and pauses one final time. I will never forget you. I love you. I love you too, is all I have time to say. I run madly back down the bloody trail, back down the hill and into the madness and solitude of the forest we loved together and shared together. I am leaving her behind. I never thought I could. The feral scream compels me faster. I never look back. The brakes chirp but do not scream. The tram grinds to a halt that feels indefinite, hesitant even. Peter lights a cigarette, only to toss it into the shrubbery. A vice in hesitation, a consideration before a threshold. The door opens, a leap into a precipice. Darkness both envelopes and pervades. Peter sits alone and opens his book, but his mind is operating in a delay. It is only after dark that Peter can grasp the significance of such a moment in life, when all things bygone are seen in the present. Pushing up headstones, and it is still raining. The tram moves on, as if picking up a thread, tenuous, but not severed. It is still raining. Don't come, but stop just short of ecstasy. This is what entered his mind just then, when the lights flickered. Why this? Far from being the last thing she said to him, why this? A window catacornered to his seat, down by the next door, was framed with red tape, as if it had just been replaced. It formed an aspect of both the eye of an insomniac and one who sleeps too much, of one who weeps at the storm or stares joyously into the sun. Outside, the town sprinted past, while Peter sat motionless inside a prism of gray walls and black floors. All things considered, Peter sought security, the passageway from wrong to right, from error to virtue, chaos to safety. Still, he wasn't looking for light, but luminescence in darkness. A bit of moonlight keeps the nightbird concealed. It adapts, it conforms, and it leaves behind a feather, at the same time that it abandons its siren, the branch still trembling. It rains. It hardly trickles, but it does rain. Hey, so you're all closed down for the night then? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Hold on. The door to the engine folds back. Hey, what was that? Oh yeah, yep. This is it for me. Technically, I'm closed down. You're my only passenger. Yes. You know, they never told me where I was going. No? Yeah. Just to be at the stop by 1:25. I've been there since 1. Oh, yeah? Yeah, I'm sorry. Am I disturbing you? I don't... Nah, not at all. Come in, sit. You don't mind? It's a little tiring to stare at the walls. I'll tell you, it's tiring to stare at the trees. I bet. Pause. So do you know? Well, obviously you know where you're going. Why wouldn't you? Yeah, well, to be honest, I get time and a half for... I do know where I'm going, but I've never been there. This came from above me. Today. I said, if I get mugged, I get double time. They said, no, it's a hazard of the job. I says, if I get killed, what then? They say then it's either burial or cremation. Well, anyway, I don't mind it. It is, though, pretty far out. Further than I've ever been. Past the end of the tracks. So if it goes beyond the threshold, where are the tracks? Surely there is no brick wall. As these last words fled from Peter's lips, and the driver had been looking over his shoulder, a doe leaped in front of the carriage. Sprays of red exploded across the windshield as if an incendiary balloon had been hurled at it. The tram jumped and crashed down again. Sparks shot up like streamers and were caught up in the confusion of blood and flecks of viscera splattered across the windows. The brakes squealed. Rain trickled in scars down a wounded face, peering in at the 2 passengers. Shafts of light extended from the carriage like 2 gored arms embracing the crimsoned foliage ahead, rounding a curve. Little eyes flickered beyond the brush. Stars purged of their constellations, and then they were gone. The cart shook, oscillating side to side, and then leveled itself. The wipers applied, and the gore was swept away. The rain had begun to pick up, cutting the air in slanted shafts, growing more furious. Soon they had become like taut steel strings, erect and unbroken from the clouds above. The driver laughed, and the train broke through them 100, 1,000 at a time. Peter could feel the coils of his sanity tightening around turning pegs bolted into the capstan of his mind. For a moment, veins of subconscious lightning flared and cut from deep within his conscience, rushing at warp speed between synapses, bursting from their roots and surging through his limbs. He balled his fists, gnashed his teeth, and flexed his toes, and then the pain passed. The driver had been saying something to him with a jubilant air, as if overcome with excitement over this accidental murder. And at once the reflex that had passed through him when he felt the razored wheels sever the bones of that poor creature redoubled, and as if wending at light speed, a psycho-subterranean switchback rebounded like scissors, shearing down the nodes of his spine, and he shuddered. A chill shot through him. He flinched, and was once again fluid, though foggy, a bit spun, and finally at ease. The rain hastened. Just then, the silence had become glacial, and the train pressed on when a familiar ringtone broke into song. Peter's heart leaped. Annie. He swiftly drew the phone to his ear and spoke, though with a deliberate affectation of indifference, to avoid sounding eager and unconsciously to refrain from speaking her name. Hello? The driver seemed to flinch and cock his head, to listen with an arched brow. There was no voice to respond at the other end, and there was no name on the call list, but he had heard it. Arrival. Beyond the lights of the suburbs, the shattered bones of overgrowth clawed and scraped at the windows. Ragged talons scuttling across the floors of silent townships. The flinty and crackling noise of those ancient fingers plunged Peter into a state of lassitude, though his brain was all alight by wires, by trepidation. The pace of his heart rose as the tram ground down to a gentle halt. Ahead, through the bleeding, unctuous windshield, coagulating blood and brain into little spongy deposits, there were no more tracks. "My man, what is this? No tracks?" "There's a switch activated by sensors. You'll see." A long spine of track revolved clockwise, like a massive helicopter blade, and the tram shook when it was fastened in place. The duo proceeded carefully, the cars juddering, stretching its limbs, crackling its knuckles, and one could perceive a yawn and placid sigh. On each side was a sheer plummet into a foggy abyss, deep enough that it looked like a bottomless crevasse in the wake of a dream. Further along, they reached a solid wall, which, upon closer inspection, was massive door. The train ambled into the half-light of the tunnel, and after coursing 50 or 100 yards, it wound down in the sharp, bolting rain like a hydra going to sleep, despairing of an obstinate and lifeless horizon, where the weather was the only entity with a pulse, shone in a tapestry of blue, snapping limbs striking the earth beyond the vast frontier and sending the waves into a tumult, a persisting tempest whispering perceptibly the siren call Annie. They arrived. "So, I don't know what you do from here, but show your face," he said, nodding to a camera lodged into the ceiling above a heavy steel door. "I thank you for the lift, sir," said Peter, extending a hand pinching a bill between thumb and forefinger. No. Otherwise you're going to get used to it, and then after a while, it will become an expectation. Just stay safe, brother." "Oh, but just this once. I insist. Besides, what do I have to keep myself safe from?" Peter stood before the door, the tail end of the train, and its gloomy blue lights fading away until they were no more, and once more he was alone. He didn't know whether to knock or a click, a clatter, and an irascible little buzz. Peter entered into a narrow corridor of hermetically white walls. Clinical, cold, even distant, like eyes that are near and a million miles away, like Annie's eyes. Caroline's were shut, always shut. A clatter, no more rain. A door, open, shut, darkness. A voice issueth forth. "Ah," cried the shadows, "I knew you would come, but you're a little late. I was worried you might be dead." "I wouldn't die on you," said Peter to the shadows of a large room. Something rose and grew larger, approaching like a loom in a nighttime squall over black waves. All along the floors were cords, tangles, and layers of multicolored cords. A light named Exit flared over top a door opposite. To the right was empty space. On the wall, a whiteboard with indecipherable scrawling. To the right, a crowding of desks against desks and 2 monitors lit up, bathing the empty space like a light dust in a snow, somewhere within the deep of a dream. Pictured on one, a corridor leading to a steel door. On another, a very bizarre painting of a woman breastfeeding her babe with a doleful look on her face. She might have been smiling, but before he could focus, the scent of lime and linoleum seeping into his conscience, he was overtaken by the tall, slowly approaching figure, its sallow, rigid face plunging forth into the light, a ghost with sunken cheeks and a square chin, a long nose and wide-set eyes, dark hair combed back slick and oily, an arm extended in welcome, gripping him by the hand with dry skin and calluses. A cavernous mouth issued the following words. "You're late." "Oh, well, the train." "Never mind. Sit. I don't want to stay here longer than I have to. I hope you got some sleep." "I never sleep," Peter said to himself in silence. "Yes, sir. I slept plenty. Good. That is the most important thing. That and not to ask questions. Just follow my lead. Yes, sir. Is it still raining? Peter felt it but couldn't define it, whatever it was. He lost his train of thought, but his faculties were wide awake. Even more so now, that he had noticed with a little chill of disquiet, something spreading across the opaque, dismal face of the woman in the painting. What had been questionable before now was not. She wasn't smiling before. Now she was. Something wasn't right. No, said Peter, throwing his gaze back over the man emerged from the shadows, draped in a long black cassock. A priest. No, it's raining harder than ever. The dead man. Damien Loveguth said he saw a man he had seen before, crawling outside on the opposite side of the hospital building like a giant spider. He was so terrified by what he had seen that he was stuttering, which he had never done in his life. The doctors asked him to sketch what he saw through his eyes. When he drew his recent view on paper, the professional folks who study medicine were disturbed by what they had seen. He then expressed himself with 2 words. It's real. The strangeness started 5 days ago in the hospital in Estonia. It's a mystery as to where the type of madness that was accurate many years ago had come from. Some exclaim that it is a type of drug that is spread to junkies who love to escape the real world by inserting drugs inside them. Those who consider themselves investigators, even if they do not have any degree of any kind, theorize that they are to blame for experimental tasks by the government. Whichever was the reason for the unexplained illness, it was never recorded on any type of document. On the first day, a patient who was pronounced deceased screamed from her room, crawled to the hallway, and began to attack those who were around. Security had arrived on time and had no choice but to shoot the zombie-like patient in the head. The unconscious and unresponsive ones, those who were in a vegetative state, the doctors and nurses couldn't help but notice loud, ear-piercing screams coming from their rooms. No one had noticed the evil that was living within the hospital until the 3rd day came around. The 2nd floor, with patients who suffered from disabilities that prevented them from either walking or speaking, began to scream and crawl like spiders. When the doctors and nurses tried to pin them down, they fought back with force. The patients' mouths were no longer normal. Human teeth, but replaced with razor-sharp jaws. Federal authorities spread the word that it was best to evacuate all medical professionals and to go with the plan of burning the building down, for no one knew the reason for the patients becoming savage. Emily Flores was on the 1st floor in the playroom when the hospital went on lockdown. She hated being with the others on the 2nd floor. It only reminded her of what was wrong with her. The ability for her to walk on her own was not an option for her. A car accident occurred when she was 12. The lower part of her spine was damaged in the crash, and it left her the only option of moving around in a wheelchair. From the doctor's point of view, it was a miracle that she had survived. For Emily, it was hell. Emily also suffered not just from her legs, but from the mind as well. She set her wheelchair next to the window of the playroom, reading a scary book. She then stared out the window and viewed a gray, cloudy sky as memories began to shoot back to her mind. Memories about the twisted-looking being she called the dead man, a monstrous-looking thing her sick mind had developed when she was a little girl. The 16-year-old girl was not new to her imagination playing tricks with her head. However, she hadn't had a recent encounter since she was 13, a year after the accident. She remembered how the dead man would slam both of his hands on her bedroom door, how he would crawl on the ceiling, hissing down at where she slept, how he looked badly burnt and wore a ripped army uniform. She recalled how he would land on his knees next to her and whisper in her ear, "Emily, Emily." She recalled how he would put his face against hers and pretend to be asleep, not wanting to face the monster in front of her. She then exited the playroom and found not only the hallway pitch black, but what looked like the entire hospital. She then locked eyes to her left and stared at the darkness, at something that called for her in a whisper, "Emily." She remembers whose voice it was. The 16-year-old girl's heart began to pump. Pump, 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 pump. She turned to the other direction of the hallway and tried to make it to the exit as fast as she could. As she did, she heard her childhood monster coming up from behind her. "Emily." She had never heard the dead man shout at her. She began to panic more, to the point where tears began streaming down her face. She was close to the door when something pushed her off her chair. She had fallen to the floor on her face. A hand turned her over and roared at her face. It was the dead man. "Emily!" She screamed and kicked to survive, but out of nowhere, the lights appeared and surrounding her were doctors and nurses wanting to calm her down. Emily was sent to a room on the 4th floor, a room where it was quiet, and there is where she met Damien Lovegas for the first time, where he was kept in a straitjacket. Emily was given medication to keep her calm and conscious. She lay in a bed next to Damien. Damien kept to himself and faced straight toward the wall, to where there was nothing for him to look at. Then the young girl saw something dripping from the ceiling down to her plain white blanket. It was red and wet. Her heart then began to pump like crazy. She slowly looked up, and on the ceiling was the dead man himself, gazing at the two patients. He then hissed, "Emily, Damien." Damien then opened his mouth to speak, and his words had sent horror through Emily's mind, heart, and soul. As she heard more screaming coming from the hallway outside her room, he said, "Can you see him too?"